Jaxon Tate pushed open the glass door of the conference room, his sharp eyes scanning the space, expecting to see his board members waiting for him. Instead, there was only one person, a young woman seated at the long mahogany table, furiously typing on her laptop. Dahlia Jensen looked up, startled by the sudden intrusion. She had been so focused on formatting the quarterly report that she hadn't heard the door open. The man standing before her was tall, broad-shouldered, and exuded power in a way that made her breath hitch. His navy suit was tailored to perfection, his dark hair neatly styled, and the intensity in his steel-blue eyes nearly made her forget where she was. "Who are you?" Jackson's deep voice carried the weight of someone used to getting immediate answers. Dahlia stood quickly, brushing a strand of dark brown hair from her face. I'm Dahlia. I'm interning in the finance department." Jaxon frowned. "Then why are you in my meeting room?" Her brows furrowed. "Your meeting room," she glanced around. "This is conference room 12. I booked it for the afternoon." He pulled out his phone, checking his schedule. His meeting was supposed to be in conference room 20. A muscle in his jaw twitched. He had walked into the wrong room. For the first time in years, Jaxon Tate had made a mistake, and yet he didn't move. He should have apologized and left, but something about Dahlia's presence rooted him in place. Dahlia shifted on her feet. "I can leave if you need the room." "No," Jaxon interrupted, surprising even himself. He exhaled, slipping his phone into his pocket. "I was supposed to be in a different room. My mistake." She smiled, and it was like a spark in the dimly lit space. "I won't tell anyone," he arched a brow. "Is that so?" Dahlia leaned forward slightly. "I mean, I could tell the entire office that the great Jaxon Tate walks into the wrong room like the rest of us mere mortals. But that seems a little unfair." Jaxon stared at her. Most people in his company were either intimidated by him or desperate to impress him. But she spoke to him like he was just a man, not a millionaire, not the CEO, not someone whose name carried weight in the corporate world. For reasons he couldn't explain, he pulled out a chair and sat down. "What are you working on?" Dahlia hesitated. "The quarterly report. Just making sure all the figures align before the official submission." Jaxon glanced at the screen. "Show me." She blinked. "You want to see my work?" He rested an elbow on the table. "You're interning in my company, aren't you? Let's see if they're using you wisely." Dahlia hesitated for only a moment before turning the laptop toward him. As he scanned her work, she tried not to stare at him, but it was impossible. He was magnetic. Everything about him commanded attention, from the way his fingers tapped against the table as he processed the numbers to the way his expression remained unreadable. "This is good." He looked up. "Better than good." "Who taught you to cross-check financial projections like this?" She flushed under his gaze. "My father was an accountant. He always told me that numbers tell a story if you know how to read them." Jaxon leaned back, intrigued. "Smart man." Dahlia's smile dimmed slightly. "He was." Jaxon caught the past tense but didn't press. Instead, he set the laptop back in front of her. "You have talent. If you were more than an intern, I'd want you working on higher-level projects." Her heart skipped. Was that a compliment from Jaxon Tate? Before she could respond, the door burst open. A frantic-looking assistant hurried inside. "Mr. Tate, you're in the wrong room." The assistant stopped, eyes darting between Jaxon and Dahlia. Jaxon stood smoothly, buttoning his suit jacket. "I know." The assistant blinked. You do?" Jaxon glanced at Dahlia. "Yes, but it was worth the detour." Dahlia's lips parted slightly, but before she could say a word, he was already walking toward the door. As he disappeared down the hall, she exhaled sharply. What just happened? Dahlia tried to refocus after Jaxon Tate left the room, but her mind was a mess of thoughts. She had come to this internship expecting long hours, dull tasks, and maybe, if she was lucky, a foot in the door to the corporate world. She had not expected the CEO himself to sit down beside her and critique her work, and she definitely had not expected the way her pulse had quickened under his gaze. She shook her head, forcing herself to concentrate. Jaxon Tate was a man leagues beyond her world. He belonged to towering glass buildings and exclusive boardrooms, the kind of places she would never be invited to. By the time she finished her report, the office was quieter, with most employees gone for the day. She gathered her things and exited the conference room, her heels clicking against the polished floor. As she approached the elevators, she reached into her bag, searching for her Metro card. Leaving so late, the deep voice sent a jolt through her. She turned to see Jaxon standing near the elevator, his jacket draped over his arm. She hadn't even heard him approach. "I wanted to finish my work," Dahlia said, gripping the strap of her bag. His gaze flickered toward her laptop case. "Dedicated?" The elevator doors slid open and they stepped inside. The space felt smaller with him in it. As the doors closed, she became acutely aware of the quiet hum of the machinery, the faint trace of his cologne, something crisp, expensive. He glanced at her. "Which division are you in?" "Finance," she said. "Just for the summer." He nodded once. "And after that," Dahlia hesitated, "hopefully something more permanent." The elevator descended smoothly. Jaxon studied her for a moment before saying, "You have potential. Don't let that go unnoticed." Her throat tightened. Words of encouragement from a man like him felt heavier than they should. She barely had time to process them before the doors opened to the lobby. As they stepped out, she adjusted the strap on her shoulder. "Well, good night, Mr. Tate." "Jaxon," he corrected. She blinked. "What?" His expression remained unreadable. "Call me Jaxon." Before she could respond, he strode toward the exit, leaving her standing there, heart pounding. The following week, Dahlia buried herself in work. She needed to prove herself. Jaxon Tate's words lingered in her mind, pushing her to be sharper, more precise. But staying unnoticed proved difficult. She was printing out reports when a voice behind her said, "Impressive." Turning, she found Jaxon, his eyes scanning the neatly compiled spreadsheets she had just collected. She straightened. "I try." He took one of the papers, his brow lifting as he read through the figures. "This projection here, it's better than the one my analysts submitted last quarter." A flush of pride warmed her, but she kept her voice even. "Then maybe you should hire me." Jaxon looked at her, something unreadable flickering in his gaze. "Maybe I should." Her breath caught. Was he serious? Before she could ask, he handed the paper back to her, his fingers brushing against hers for the briefest moment. Then, with the kind of confidence only men like him possessed, he walked away. Dahlia exhaled, gripping the reports like they were the only thing keeping her grounded. A few days later, an email arrived in her inbox that made her heart stop. "Meeting request, Jaxon Tate." She stared at it, pulse hammering. Why would he want to meet with her? Taking a slow breath, she clicked open the details. The time was set for that afternoon. Location? His office. When she finally stood outside the massive glass doors of his penthouse-level office, she smoothed down her blazer, trying to steady herself. The assistant gave her a nod. "You can go in." Dahlia stepped inside, and there he was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, phone in hand. The city's skyline stretched behind him, golden light casting sharp angles on his features. He ended his call and turned to her. "Sit," she did, folding her hands in her lap to stop them from fidgeting. Jaxon leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "I have a proposition." Her stomach tightened. "What kind of proposition?" His gaze locked onto hers. "Work for me." Dahlia blinked. "I already work for you." "Not as an intern." He pushed off the desk and walked toward her. "I want you on my team permanently. You're sharp, you see things others don't. You challenge assumptions instead of accepting them." Her heart pounded. "But I haven't even finished my internship." He tilted his head. "You don't need to." Dahlia exhaled sharply. "This is unexpected." Jaxon studied her. "Unexpected isn't always a bad thing." She couldn't look away from him. This was an opportunity most people would kill for, but there was something else beneath the surface, something unspoken in the way he watched her. "Take the night to think about it," he said finally. "Let me know tomorrow." Dahlia stood, gripping the back of the chair for a moment. "Okay." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "And Dahlia," she turned, pulse quickening. His expression softened just enough to be noticeable. I don't make offers I don't mean. She nodded once before slipping out the door, her world tilting in ways she never expected. Dahlia spent the night pacing in her small apartment, Jaxon's unexpected job offer looping through her thoughts like an unsolved equation. The opportunity was staggering more responsibility, direct access to one of the most powerful men in the industry, and a future that could be built on more than just fleeting internships. But it wasn't just the offer itself that unsettled her. It was the way he had looked at her when he said he didn't make offers he didn't mean. By morning, she had made up her mind. She arrived at the office early, clutching her decision tightly in her chest as she rode the elevator to Jaxon's floor. When she stepped into his office, he was already at his desk, scanning through reports with the kind of intensity that made it clear he had been up for hours. He didn't look up at first, but she felt the moment he became aware of her presence. "You're early," he said, setting his pen down and finally meeting her gaze. "I wanted to give you my answer in person," she said, steadying her voice. A flicker of intrigue crossed his face. "And I'll take the job," she said, exhaling as she said the words out loud. "But I want to earn it. I don't want anyone thinking I got here by accident." Jaxon studied her for a long moment before nodding. Good. Relief flooded her, but it was short-lived. He rose from his chair, walking toward her with the measured steps of a man who was always 5 moves ahead. "If you want to earn it, then be ready," he said, stopping just close enough that the air between them turned charged. "I don't expect perfection, but I do expect excellence." Dahlia lifted her chin, refusing to shrink under the weight of his presence. "I wouldn't have accepted if I wasn't ready for that." His lips curved not quite a smile, but something close. "Then we start now." And just like that, everything shifted. The days blurred into a whirlwind of meetings, financial analyses, and late nights spent poring over reports that had once seemed daunting but now felt like challenges she was determined to conquer. Jaxon was relentless, but he was also sharp and precise in the way he pushed her. He questioned her assumptions, forced her to defend her decisions, and never let her take the easy route. She had expected the pressure. What she hadn't expected was how much she thrived under it. One evening, as she sat in the corner of his office reviewing projections, Jaxon leaned back in his chair and watched her. "You realize you've outperformed half my team in less than a month," he said. Dahlia glanced up, surprised by the praise. "I thought you didn't believe in compliments." "I don't give them freely," he admitted, "but I give them when they are deserved." Warmth spread through her chest, but she forced herself to stay focused. "Then I guess I'm doing something right." Jaxon's expression turned thoughtful. "You don't just do things right, Dahlia. You change the game." Her breath caught. There was something about the way he said her name low, deliberate, like it carried more weight than it should. Before she could respond, his phone rang, breaking whatever moment had settled between them. He answered, his tone immediately shifting into the clipped efficiency he used when dealing with high-stakes negotiations. Dahlia took the opportunity to gather her notes, but her mind was no longer on the numbers. The air between them was changing, and she wasn't sure what to do about it. A week later, everything unraveled. Dahlia was reviewing financial discrepancies in a project proposal when she found something that made her stomach twist. The numbers didn't add up, but not in a way that suggested an error. Someone had deliberately manipulated the figures. She hesitated for only a moment before heading straight to Jaxon's office. He was on a call when she arrived, but the second he saw her face, he ended it. "What is it?" She set the file in front of him. "Someone's siphoning money through one of the subsidiary accounts." Jaxon's jaw tightened as he flipped through the pages. He didn't ask if she was sure he already knew she wouldn't have brought it to him unless she was. "Who else has seen this?" he asked. "Just me," she said. "I wanted to bring it to you first." His gaze locked onto hers, something unreadable flickering in his expression. "You did the right thing," she exhaled, relieved. "I can keep looking into it." "No," Jaxon interrupted. "This is bigger than an internal review." "I'll handle it," Dahlia hesitated. But his voice softened just enough to make her pulse quicken. "I trust you, Dahlia." The words landed with more weight than they should have. Before she could respond, his assistant knocked on the door, announcing an urgent board meeting. Jaxon closed the file, his expression unreadable once more. "This isn't over," he said. Dahlia nodded, but as she left his office, she couldn't shake the feeling that something between them had shifted again. And this time, there was no going back. The tension in Jaxon's office was suffocating. Dahlia stood near his desk, watching as he flipped through the fraudulent reports with a sharp intensity. His jaw was tight, his grip on the papers firm, as if he were holding on to something deeper than just numbers. She had seen Jaxon in meetings, had watched him command boardrooms with a single glance, but this was different. This wasn't calculated strategy, this was personal. "You're sure no one else has seen this?" His voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge to it. Dahlia nodded. "I double-checked. The only reason I even caught it was because I was cross-referencing projections from the last quarter." He set the papers down and leaned back in his chair, fingers pressing against his temples. "This isn't just sloppy bookkeeping. Someone is deliberately funneling money, covering their tracks well enough that most wouldn't notice." "But you would have," she said, his eyes lifted to hers. "And you did." She swallowed, the weight of his gaze sending something electric through her. Jaxon stood abruptly, moving toward the window. His reflection was sharp in the glass, the city sprawled out behind him. "This company is my responsibility. If there's corruption inside these walls, it means I wasn't paying close enough attention." She stepped closer. "That's not true. Whoever did this knew how to bury it deep. Most people wouldn't have questioned the numbers." He turned then, his expression unreadable. "But you did." Dahlia's pulse quickened. "I wasn't going to ignore something that didn't make sense." Silence stretched between them, thick with something unspoken. Then, without warning, Jaxon reached for his jacket. "I need to handle this personally. There's a meeting I have to call." Dahlia exhaled, nodding. "Do you want me there?" His fingers stilled on his cuff. "No, if something goes wrong, I don't want you caught in the fallout." Her chest tightened. "You're expecting trouble." "I always expect trouble." His voice was quieter now, but there was something else woven in something almost protective. "Stay out of this one, Dahlia." She wanted to argue, to insist that she had already been pulled into this mess, but something in his expression stopped her, so instead she nodded. "All right." For a long moment he just looked at her. Then, with a reluctant exhale, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a keycard. "If anyone asks, you're working remotely today," he said. She frowned. "What's this?" "My private office across town. If things get messy, I want you out of the line of fire." Dahlia hesitated before taking the card from his hand. His fingers brushed against hers, lingering just long enough for her breath to catch. She curled her fingers around the keycard. "Be careful, Jaxon." His lips parted slightly, as if he wanted to say something more, but instead he gave a small nod before striding toward the door. And just like that, he was gone. The hours stretched long, the silence of Jaxon's private office pressing in as Dahlia stared at financial reports she could no longer focus on. She had checked her phone too many times to count, but there were no updates, no messages, no calls. Then, just when she was about to break and call him herself, the door swung open. Jaxon. His tie was loosened, the top button of his shirt undone. He looked exhausted, but when he saw her standing there waiting for him, something in his expression softened. "It's handled," he said. Relief flooded her. "What happened?" He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. "Someone in upper management was orchestrating the scheme. They're gone now." Dahlia exhaled, tension slipping from her shoulders. "Good." Jaxon watched her for a moment, then moved toward her, his steps slow, deliberate. "You didn't have to wait here," he said. "I did." His brow lifted slightly. "Why?" She swallowed, heart pounding. "Because I wanted to know you were okay." Something shifted in his expression, something raw, unguarded. "You shouldn't care this much," he said quietly. Dahlia took a step closer. "Too late." For the first time since she had met him, Jaxon Tate looked shaken. Not in the way he had been when facing corporate betrayal, but in a way that had nothing to do with business at all. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she reached up, pressing her palm against his cheek. His breath hitched. For a moment, he didn't move. Then slowly, his hand came up to cover hers, holding it there. "Dahlia," he murmured. She shook her head. "Don't overthink this." His lips curved slightly, something almost amused flickering in his eyes. "You're telling me not to overthink," she smiled just a little. "Just this once," Jaxon exhaled, his forehead pressing against hers. "I walked into the wrong room that day," he whispered, "but I think it was the best mistake I ever made." Dahlia's heart swelled. "It wasn't a mistake." His fingers traced along her jaw, slow, reverent. "No," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't." And then, finally, he kissed her. It wasn't hesitant or uncertain, it was deep, consuming, as if he had been waiting for this moment just as much as she had. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm against her skin. "I think I'm in trouble," he murmured. Dahlia smiled. "Why?" "Because I don't want to let you go." She curled her fingers into his shirt, holding him close. "Then don't." Jaxon exhaled sharply, then kissed her again like a man who had made up his mind. And Dahlia knew, without a doubt, that neither of them would ever be the same again. Jaxon traced slow circles on Dahlia's back as they stood in the dim light of his office, the world outside forgotten. The weight of everything, the discovery of the fraud, the confrontation, the storm that had threatened his company had settled, leaving only this moment, raw and undeniable. He hadn't planned for this. He planned for everything else in his life with ruthless precision, but Dahlia had slipped through the cracks of his careful world and wedged herself deep in his chest before he could stop her. Dahlia tilted her head, searching his gaze. "What now?" Jaxon exhaled, his fingers tightening slightly against the fabric of her blouse. "Now I take you to dinner." She laughed softly, the sound threading through the tension that still lingered between them. "That's your grand plan," he lifted a brow. "Would you rather we go back to pretending nothing has changed?" Her expression softened. "No." "Then let me take you somewhere." He stepped back just enough to look her over, as if memorizing her standing there in his space where she somehow fit so perfectly. "I don't want this to be rushed. I want to do this right." Dahlia studied him, then nodded. "All right, Jaxon." He liked the way she said his name. No hesitation, no formality, just him. He didn't take her to a 5-star restaurant with linen tablecloths and waiters hovering like shadows. That wasn't what tonight was about. Instead, he drove her to a rooftop terrace overlooking the city, where a private table had been set beneath glowing lights. The skyline stretched behind them, the air warm with the remnants of the day. Dahlia's eyes widened as she took it all in. "You do realize I would have been fine with a regular restaurant, right?" Jaxon pulled out her chair, waiting for her to sit before taking his own. "I don't do regular." She watched him, something unreadable flickering in her gaze. "No, I don't suppose you do." The food arrived, a carefully curated selection of dishes he had arranged in advance. Dahlia lifted a fork, glancing at him. "How long have you been planning this?" He met her gaze evenly. "Since the moment I decided I wasn't going to let you go." Her fingers trembled slightly before she set her fork down, her expression shifting. "Jaxon, I know," he said, cutting her off gently. "This is fast. I know your life was already complicated enough without me throwing myself into the middle of it." Dahlia leaned forward slightly. "That's not what I was going to say." Something in his chest tightened. "Then what?" She hesitated, then exhaled. I don't know how to be in your world." Jaxon studied her, then leaned back, folding his hands in front of him. "You think there's some rulebook to it?" She gestured to the view, the setting, the sheer extravagance of it all. "Your life is this, Jaxon. It's power and luxury and knowing exactly how to navigate every room you walk into. My life has never been like that." He was quiet for a moment. Then, his voice low, he said, "You think I was born into this?" Dahlia frowned slightly. "Weren't you?" He lifted his glass, studying the deep amber liquid before setting it down. "No," she blinked, caught off guard. But my father worked in construction, Jaxon said, his tone even. My mother ran a small bookstore. We weren't poor, but we weren't anywhere near this. He gestured around them. Everything I have, everything I built, I fought for it. Dahlia's lips parted slightly, her gaze searching his. You think I know how to navigate every room I walk into? He exhaled, shaking his head slightly. That came with time, but I remember what it was like to stand in rooms where I didn't belong, to feel like I was always one misstep away from losing everything I worked for. Dahlia was silent for a long moment. Then softly she said, I didn't know that. Jaxon met her gaze. Because I don't tell people, she swallowed. But you're telling me. He nodded once, slowly. Yes. The tension between them shifted, deepened into something heavier, something unspoken yet understood. Dahlia reached across the table, her fingers brushing against his. I don't need all of this, Jaxon. The rooftop, the private dinners, the extravagant gestures, I just need you. His fingers curled around hers, holding them in the space between them. That's good, he murmured. Because I don't know how to be anything less than yours. Dahlia's breath hitched, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she squeezed his hand, her expression softening. Then I guess we're in trouble together. A slow smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I think I can live with that. The night stretched around them, the city humming below, but in that moment, all that mattered was the woman across from him, the woman who had changed everything. Jaxon held Dahlia's hand as they walked through the quiet streets, the city lights casting a warm glow around them. The rooftop dinner had ended, but he wasn't ready to let the night slip away just yet. There was something about being with her, about the way she made everything feel different, that made him want to stretch time itself. Dahlia glanced up at him, her eyes filled with something unreadable. You're quiet. He gave a slow exhale, his thumb brushing absently against her knuckles. Just thinking. About, Jaxon stopped walking, turning to face her fully. You, her lips parted slightly, but she didn't look away. Jaxon, he reached up, tucking a loose strand of her hair behind her ear. I don't do things halfway, Dahlia. When I decide on something, I commit to it. She swallowed, watching him carefully. And what exactly are you committing to? His hand slid down, resting against her jaw. Us. Something flickered in her expression, something vulnerable, something unguarded. Are you sure? Jaxon's gaze didn't waver. I've never been more sure of anything. A slow smile spread across her lips, and the sight of it sent a warmth through his chest that he hadn't felt in years. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against him as the city moved around them, the world shrinking to just the two of them. Days passed, turning into weeks, and Jaxon found himself navigating unfamiliar territory. He had spent years consumed by his work, his success, his relentless pursuit of building something greater than himself. But now, he found himself carving out time in ways he never had before. Dahlia was woven into his life now, not just as an employee, not just as someone who had caught his attention, but as something more. Something irreplaceable. One evening, she stood in his kitchen, flipping through one of the reports she had brought home from the office. Jaxon leaned against the counter, watching her with an amused expression. You do realize you don't have to work on this right now, he said. She glanced up, raising an eyebrow. Says the man who answers emails at 2 in the morning. He pushed off the counter, moving toward her. I have a reputation to uphold. She set the report down, crossing her arms as she looked up at him. And what reputation is that? His hands settled at her waist, pulling her closer. The one where I never back down from something I want. Her breath hitched slightly, but she didn't pull away. And what do you want? Jaxon's voice dropped lower. You. Dahlia's fingers curled against his shirt, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then, finally, she whispered, Then you already have me. The words settled deep, anchoring something inside him he hadn't even realized was drifting. As the months passed, Jaxon knew there was no going back. Dahlia had become part of his world in ways he had never expected, and he had no intention of letting that change. One evening, as they stood on the balcony of his penthouse, overlooking the city, he reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around the velvet box hidden there. Dahlia leaned against the railing, the wind brushing through her hair. "You're staring." Jaxon stepped closer, his heart pounding in a way that was entirely unfamiliar to him. "I have something for you." She turned, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "What is it?" He pulled the box from his pocket, flipping it open to reveal the ring inside. A single, exquisite diamond set in a band that was both elegant and timeless. Dahlia's breath caught. "Jaxon," he took her hand, his voice steady despite the way his pulse thundered. "I told you I don't do things halfway. And I don't want a life where you're not in it." She swallowed hard, her eyes shining. "Are you asking me to marry you?" Jaxon gave a small nod. "I am." Dahlia exhaled sharply, her free hand coming up to cover her mouth for a moment before she dropped it, her expression breaking into something so full of emotion it made his chest ache. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Jaxon." Relief, joy. Something deeper than either of those things surged through him as he slid the ring onto her finger. He pulled her into his arms, pressing a kiss to her lips that held every unspoken promise he had made. And as they stood there, wrapped in each other, Jaxon knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where he was meant to be. The wedding was an elegant affair, not because of the grandeur, but because of the people who filled the space. Jaxon had never been one for spectacle, but this wasn't about appearances. This was about them. As Dahlia walked toward him, dressed in white, her eyes locked onto his, Jaxon felt something shift inside him. He had built an empire, had conquered boardrooms, had outmaneuvered rivals, but none of it had ever made him feel the way this did. When she reached him, he took her hands, his grip firm, unwavering. "I never believed in fate," he said, his voice steady. "I believed in strategy, in control. But then I walked into the wrong room and everything changed." Dahlia smiled, her fingers squeezing his. "It wasn't the wrong room, Jaxon. It was exactly where you were supposed to be." His chest tightened. "You're exactly where I'm supposed to be." And as they exchanged vows, as he kissed her with everything he had, Jaxon Tate knew that for the first time in his life, he had found something worth more than anything he had ever built. He had found home.